Marinero, the Sick podcast, and controversy has hit Montreal. Unbelievable. It's the NHL draft. We're in day 2. Yesterday, Friday, day 1, and the Montreal Canadiens with the 31st pick in the draft. 4 days ago, draft prospect Logan Mailloux, who was involved in a scandal last year, issued a statement. Being drafted into the National Hockey League is an honor and a privilege that no one takes lightly. The NHL draft should be one of the most exciting landmark moments in a player's career, and given the circumstances, I don't feel I have demonstrated strong enough maturity or character to earn that privilege in the 2021 draft. If I were to ever have the honor of being selected, I would want a fan base to be proud to welcome me to their organization. I know it will take time for society to build back the trust I have lost, and that is why I think it is best that I renounce myself from the 2021 NHL draft and ask that no one select me this upcoming weekend. I feel that this would allow me the opportunity to demonstrate an adequate level of maturity and character next season with the London Knights in the OHL and provide all the NHL teams the opportunity to reassess my character towards the 2022 NHL draft. Signed, Logan Mailloux. For those who are not aware, Logan Mailloux last year was playing in Sweden and met an 18-year-old young lady. They engaged in a sexual act, and he took pictures without her consent and shared them with his teammates. And it obviously launched a criminal investigation in which charges were filed against him. He had to pay a fine. And, there's still more developing stories to this. Who do the Montreal Canadiens draft with the 31st pick overall in the first round? Logan Mailloux. Joining me right now, former scout of the Montreal Canadiens and founder of recruits.ca, which can tell you everything you need to know about NHL prospects. Hello, Grant McCagg.
Hey, Tony.
Allow me to have a drink, if you can, here. Johnny Bootlegger's whiskey, old-fashioned, both refreshing and authentic to the classic cocktail, available now at SAQs near you. I'm sure when everyone heard the Montreal Canadiens were drafting Logan Mailloux, they probably had one of these. Grant, how shocked were you?
Well, in my draft guide, it's funny. I went back and looked at it, an article that I wrote about who the Canadiens may pick. This was a while back before all of this stuff took place, like with him renouncing and all that. He was the first guy I mentioned. So certainly, as far as talent goes and fit and all of that stuff, he, if it wasn't for this stuff, I think it was a no-brainer that they took him at that spot. But obviously, I did not expect him to go in the first round. I thought that they, at the very least, if they just had to have him or think that he was going to go in the second round, trade down, get another pick, and at least wait till Saturday and not steal steal the headlines and it all being negative on Friday night.
It's the Sick Podcast, and the show is brought to you by Essentia, the world's only natural memory foam mattress. Go to myessentia.com/sickpod and use code SICKPOD for a free pillow with your purchase. Essentia Beyond Organic Sleep. If people were sleeping last night, everyone woke up in, controversy has hit. It's a scandal here in Montreal. The Canadiens, Grant, they're supposed to be the standard of the National Hockey League. They're supposed to be the class of the National Hockey League. And obviously a lot of people are upset by this because they believe the Canadiens somewhat condone what happened by selecting Mailloux, who said, "Don't select me."
Yeah, it's tough. I did not expect it. And I don't think the NHL expected it. I talked to one scout last night and said, their whole team was they couldn't believe it, that a team had taken them in the first round. It just was not expected that they would step up and do that. Montreal always does their homework on guys, and especially character-wise. they must have done a pile of vetting on this guy and talked to him a lot. But, considering what happened, Tony, I don't think it's something that any of us would ever do. I don't know, like I wrote an article about today, and it's not something that any of my friends would ever do or I would ever do. And you just wonder, how can teammates trust him? It's gonna take a long time to build up trust with him, considering that it's such an intimate, private moment like that. To do something like that, it's just such a revelation on a person's character, I think. And you wonder if he can mature enough and get over it and become the man that everybody would like him to be a first round pick of the Montreal Canadiens and to represent that CH.
Grant, I don't know if I've ever felt, to be totally transparent with you, and I think you can feel it, I don't know if I've ever felt this uncomfortable actually doing a show or talking about something, and I can sense that you're feeling the same way right now. There's a lot of people, there are some people who are going to say, hey, what about second chances in life? And believe you me, I believe in that, but this probably should have been someone else's mistake to make to select him if they wanted to give him a second chance. I mean, and the Canadiens really just should not have been a part of this.
Yeah, I mean, he was going to get picked somewhere in the draft. I believe that. But to make him a first round pick is just the part that's really, really, that I'm really struggling with, especially. Because, the last line of the statement by the Canadiens was said about how, repercussions. Well, what are they saying to the kid by picking him in the first round as far as repercussions goes? What's the repercussions? What's the penalty? How is he penalized by being taken as a first round pick? And that's the part that I'm especially struggling with. I mean, yes, second chances, all that stuff. But, he probably had it right in saying, like, nobody dropped me this year. Give it a year for feelings to heal, some forgiveness, people to be more forgiving. And they go and take him in the first round. So it's a tough one. I always, when I was on with you yesterday, happy draft day. I always, it's my favorite day of the year. And I woke up this morning just feeling, I don't know, dirty. And it's not a good feeling, Tony.
There's a lot of people who, just loved what the Montreal Canadiens did in the playoffs and 3 wins away from a Stanley Cup. And they feel like, all that good that they did is gone with one selection, and it's evaporated. It's a sick podcast, and you can go to sportbuffshop.com for all of your officially licensed sports apparel and more. Use code SICK15 for 15% off on all of their items. So in the NHL draft, if there's a team out there that's your favorite team, you can definitely pick up some apparel from them. Grant, the only explanation that I can give from a hockey point of view and the kid's ability is, like everything that we're talking about, I'm sure the Canadiens know. So from a hockey point of view, the only explanation I can give is the Canadiens with the 31st pick probably believe that this kid, had it not been for this scandal, has the potential to be a top 10 pick, and they're getting an absolute steal, and the temptation was way too big. I mean, does any of that make sense? Does he have a top 10 potential? Not that it matters.
They believe that. I mean, he was at that Erie showcase and Trevor said, like, top 5, top 10 talent, just, definitely the second best, if not the best, right defenseman in the draft. And to get that at 30th overall, I mean, they looked at that and weighed the negative against the positive, and I guess it was such a positive as far as his on ice abilities that they thought, well, we're not going to be able to get him unless we take him at 30th overall. I know the feeling was that St. Louis might take him, but I think with everything that went down in the last week, nobody was taking him in the first round, and I still think that was the biggest mistake Yeah, you want him so bad, I get it, but just don't take him in the first round. It was for me, it was a mistake.
Grant, you're a former scout with the Montreal Canadiens, and you have a tremendous scouting service and magazine called Recruits, and you can subscribe at recruits.ca. Where did you have Logan Mailloux in your rankings?
Well, that was tough. I mean, first round talent all day. But what I ended up doing and deciding to do was put him as the first pick of the second round. And I mean, even that, that was before all of this stuff. The guide was published before all of this stuff in the last week, and I learned more about the whole thing. Or otherwise, I don't believe I would have had him that high.
So if you hadn't heard about this stuff, obviously the terrible thing that happened, which once again was taking a photo of a sexual act without the woman's consent and forwarding it to his teammates. Had you not heard about that, just strictly hockey, he would have been where exactly on your list?
Well, I mean, that's tough. I was asked that today on Twitter, and it's just there were so few viewings of him this year. He played a little bit in Sweden before this happened. He's only played 4 OHL games in the last 2 years. So, it was going more on potential more than anything. So I don't think I would have ever had him top 15 just because of a lack of viewing. But every NHL scout that I talked to, undeniably he top 20 skill, top 15 skill for sure. But in this draft, they just, there's a lot of guys like that where you had to sort of rank them based on what, really taking a flyer on him. And so I don't know that I'd had him top 20 regardless, just because of lack of concrete viewings of him.
Excellent photo, centrally located close to downtown shopping and universities in Montreal. Ships to all of Canada. Professional staff at the store and online to help you choose the gear you really need. This was a remote draft, so unlike the Kotkaniemi draft where there was that photo of a Montreal Canadiens fan in the stands who was shocked that they chose Kotkaniemi. We don't know, what the reaction would have been from a photo point of view, but of course we know, we're hearing it and we're seeing it on social media. Grant McCagg, former scout of the Montreal Canadiens, founder of recruits.ca. Grant, this past week, Marc Bergevin spoke about Shea Weber having to play through pain. He'll be ruled out for next season, and his career is possibly over. Logan Mailloux, 6'3", 215-pound, right-handed defenseman. Is it possible, in your opinion, that somebody at that table said, on the ice, he's a poor man's Shea Weber. He can do some of the things that Shea Weber did. Is that possible? And does that maybe somewhat explain why they did what they did, or they selected who they selected?
Yeah, I think, if you wanted to describe what type of a player he was, it'd be more of a cross between Petrie and Weber, better skater than Weber, maybe a little more physical than Petrie, but doesn't have the bomb of Weber, or, probably not as tough. Who is as the man mountain in front of the net. So I'd more describe him kind of like a cross, between the two, and not saying that, all their best qualities, but, better skater than Weber, and, but not as good a skater as Petrie type thing. And, he can be a top 4 defenseman for sure. I think, he can take a top 2 spot on the right side in a few years if he develops as anticipated. So definitely that's the way they're looking at it. They needed down the road, they needed a top 2 right defenseman, and that's very valuable. There aren't many right defensemen. Like you look at a draft and, you get maybe a quarter of the defensemen taken are righties. So they're so valuable in that regard. So certainly from a hockey standpoint, I get it 100%.
Grant, like I said, you used to work for the Montreal Canadiens as a scout. That was back in the Bob Gainey era. Can you paint a picture of what leading up to the draft looks like, and all the scouts and how many scouts and you gather together and what they ask of you or what you have to present, what documents and stuff like that? Paint a picture for us if you can.
Well, to be honest, Tony, I was part-time, and they didn't have me in all the big meetings at the end of the year and stuff like that. So I can't, I can only speculate to a certain degree how that goes. But they get together and hash things out over a week. Meetings, steady meetings. Everybody has their reports in. They discuss, every player, who they think will be taken, go over do all their interviews together. Montreal's got one of the hardest working staffs in the league, and because of that, I mean, they did a pile of background character work on this, and I mean, a lot of it will probably come out over the next little while.
Yeah,
they'll be explaining it, but they must have been comfortable that this kid is truly remorseful. That's what I've heard. That he swears something like that'll never happen again, and all that stuff. And you have to believe in second chances. The kid was not going to be banned from playing in the NHL. So in that regard, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, people are outraged right now, and it's really tough. It's a tough goal right now, and we're going to have to see what the Canadiens organization and what Logan himself has to say about it over the next while.
He's not the first player to enter the National Hockey League after having done something terrible in the past. It's happened to others. Were there players when you were working for the Montreal Canadiens that had done something terrible in the past? And if so, when they went around and they asked everyone for their opinion, if you would have been asked about him and whether or not you would go with a pick like this, you would have said what?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. No, there wasn't anything. It's kind of hard to compare. It's pretty different. I think the fact that he's going to be playing in London. Trevor has a pretty good relationship with Mark and Dale both, and they must have done a pile of talking to those guys and got their viewpoints on whether they thought this kid could be rehabilitated and mature to the level where someday he could have an NHL career. But yeah, it's tough. I've been thinking about it, and I can't really come up with a comparable on it.
It's once again, it's. I don't know if we've ever tackled a more difficult subject because on the one hand, the Montreal Canadiens, they have a moral responsibility. I mean, they are the standard, and the message that they send is obviously not a good one. Not only to their female fan base, but if you're a male, you got to feel pretty bad about this. On the other hand, a lot of people are going to say he was 17, he made a mistake, and what if it was your son? But on the other hand, someone will say, and what if it was your daughter? Right? So it's an awful situation.
Yeah, Tony. I mean, I'm struggling knowing what to say. I mean, I think you've summed it up well. I can't really add anything to it.
You talked about a hybrid between Weber and Petrie. Who out there in the draft could be at this point where we are? Is there somewhat of a sleeper, or at this point you're looking for a miracle?
You mean like with their 4th round picks?
Yeah.
Well, I haven't been able to look. I've been doing this podcast for the past.
Yeah, no, you're right about that.
So I'm kind of distracted right now, so I don't know who's been taken, but their picks so far have been tremendous. Otherwise,
tell me about their other picks, Grant.
Yeah, well, I mean, the two guys that they took, their last two players there were at 62, and then and 63. They were both in my top 46.
Is that right?
Yeah. And then the kid they just took in the third round, 87 or whatever it was, he was in my second round. So 4 picks that are in my top 2 rounds, not too many teams got value like that. So quite impressed by that. Kapanen went head first into the boards at the U18s, and they had to take him off on a stretcher. Going into it, that he was really high on a lot of people's boards. Like he'd had a great year in junior in Finland.
Yeah.
And then, suffered that injury and never came back in a couple games, but didn't look right. And he dropped further on the draft. I figured he'd go somewhere in the mid second round, and he ended up going to the Canadiens at the end of which I think was a very solid pick. And Kidney, I'm pretty sure the Canadiens had him ranked as a first rounder. To get him at 62 was a good coup for them. They're pretty happy. And then the Kostenko kid, just got power play potential. Another right-handed defenseman who I had at the end of the second round that they got to take near the end of the third. So all of those guys are really good picks, and hopefully, I'd like to see them get a couple of Q guys in the fourth. I don't know. It's probably happening right now. Like Stefan Robidaw's son.
Yeah.
Justin hadn't been picked yet. I'd love to see him, even if they have to step up a bit and to grab him. I'd love to, for all I know, he's been picked. I haven't been looking at the board the last 20 minutes, but I think there'll be a couple Q guys go yet too. And then they also sent, drafts in Montreal next year.
Yeah.
And they traded one of their picks. And I figured they'd do that because they got so many guys to sign and there's only 50 contracts. There's draft picks that are never going to sign. So 11 really was overkill considering they've had a bunch in the last 3 drafts too that they have to sign.
Yeah.
So it made sense for them to trade at least one. They might even do that with a couple more of their later ones. Trade for picks next year so that they can have extra picks at, when they're hosting.
Yeah, he is Grant McCagg, and as we speak, Justin Robida has not been picked, okay, because I have an eye on it.
Okay.
You're right. We know the pressure of, and the expectations. The Canadians, there's a lot of people that ask for the Canadians to pick players out of the queue, and Quebecers notably, and they're asked about it every year. You talked about the draft in Montreal next year. If I can give a shout out to Sophistication, because they are event rentals. Live music, DJs, sound systems, tents, chairs, tables, decor, lighting, photo booth, TV screens. They're friends of the show. It's a one-stop shop. You can call them at 514-570-5770. Hold on to the number for next year for your draft party. But of course, in the meantime, if you're going to celebrate anything, you can always give them a call. Yeah.
I see that they got William Trudeau. He's PEI playing for Charlottetown.
Yeah.
Q defenseman. Another guy that I think the club probably had pegged as a second round guy. I had him in the third, 113 overall. I think I had him 75th overall. So, 5 guys in my top 75 so far. It's really liking the value that they're getting with their picks. He's a really smart defenseman that loving their picks. Since the first round. Well, today, I guess. Yeah.
Grant, listen, thanks so much for joining me to talk about what has been a difficult topic. And even though some following probably don't think it's a difficult topic for them, I wonder how they would feel if they were actually hosting a show or hosting a podcast or writing about this. There has been a lot of backlash so far from huge, a lot of members of the fan base, from media. There's been a lot of backlash from, you would think, you wonder if it's going to affect ticket sales. You wonder if it's going to affect corporate sponsors. And it's I know a lot of people are saying, and there's, a lot of people that are saying he's 17, he made a mistake. We all do. He deserves a second chance. Everyone deserves a second chance. That's easy to say when it's not your daughter. And if it is your daughter, then it's probably not that easy to say, is it? So.
Well said, Tony.
Yeah. Thank you, Grant. Grant, recruits.ca is the website. You can follow him and subscribe to his publication. He is a former scout with the Montreal Canadiens, and he will always give you great scouting reports on all these players every draft year, and subscribe to the publication. Grant, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Tony.
Marinero, the Sick Podcast, and you can listen to it on iHeartRadio and follow it on all social media platforms. Till then, till next time.